Coming to you from deep within the swamps of the southeastern United States, this is a paranormal podcast unlike one you've ever experienced before. This is the Westgate Paranormal Podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Westgate Paranormal Podcast. Today is Tuesday, August the 7th, 2018, and today's episode is going to be sort of an introduction, I guess you could say, to paranormal investigating, what you need to know to get started for those who are completely in the dark, no pun intended, and some of the equipment to use, and how not to break the bank and keep your sanity along the way.
Yeah. I just think it's kind of good to know that you don't have to go into it having a ton of money. A lot of people, you see a lot of the stuff on TV where they have all this high-tech equipment, and you really you don't need to do that if you just want to go out and kind of, I guess, play around with it to see if it's something that you're interested in. You don't have to have a ton of money to do it.
Exactly. It doesn't take a lifetime investment of equipment and material in order to find evidence, especially nowadays with a lot of the things that we have already sort of with us a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Like with our phones, you've got a built-in camera. If you've got a newer phone, then those cameras are awesome. Actually comparable to some high-end DSLRs for video as well as for actual just photos.
Yeah.
You've got built-in sound recorders on them.
You can download like Ovilus apps and things. You don't have to have these separate devices anymore.
Yeah. Instead of going out and spending hundreds of dollars on an Ovilus, you can get like Echovox or something and use that. And even like with SB7s, spirit boxes, things like that. It's all sort of integrated with a lot of these things, as long as you kind of do your research and you're not getting like a silly app that, is kind of a toy. Do a little bit of research in that aspect.
Yeah.
So what is your favorite piece of equipment when you're doing ghost hunting or an investigation or something? Do you have one?
Well, I haven't personally used it, but just because of you using it on your tour and things like that, I really like the Echovox. I think that is a really, really cool and handy thing to have.
Yes, I love the Echovox. Danny Rodberg, and that's just not really his name, but it's sort of an inside joke with his group. Some people started calling him that. With Big Beard Studios, though, you can find it on the Play Store and everything, with several different versions of Echovox and some of his newer sort of collaborations that he's done with that, with like ITC Legion and stuff also.
I guess one that I've used, I really like just recorders, whether it's on your phone or, an actual like voice recorder. I think that it's cool. I feel like you're more likely to get an EVP than you are, say, something on your phone camera-wise,
Oh, I agree. That's one of the easiest things.
Yeah.
And to me, it's one of the most personal things. You're getting a recording of the actual voice of a spirit.
Right.
So it's like you're actually there with them. And you have more than just, maybe you can get a picture sometimes, maybe you can't. I mean, that's another reason why we have so many different pieces of equipment that are, I won't say completely specialized. In a way they are specialized because they each serve their own function, but they round out as a whole. And so you don't need every single piece of it.
Right.
And some of them are integrated, like millimeters. Millimeters have an EMF meter, even like the entry-level millimeters, which are honestly my favorite. You have an EMF meter and you have a thermocouple to take temperatures. And so you're getting the differences, if you have cold spots happen. I'm sorry if you hear barking in the background or something. Our neighbors' dogs are going nuts. Hopefully this is not really picking it up very much. But yeah, something like that, that's, I don't know if you necessarily say it's an entry level. It can be because they're not very expensive. But it's a couple pieces of instruments in one. So,
well, what about you? What's your favorite that you use?
I honestly have to say EVPs. I rely more on EVPs than anything else because, for one, they're so easy to get EVPs. You can be in a controlled area. Make sure you know what your background noises are. An EVP is an electronic voice phenomena, so it's basically an audio recording where you're in a location asking spirits questions and then leaving enough time, and that's a big part of it, leaving enough time for a response before you ask another question.
Yeah, I've noticed a lot of people tend to they go from one question to the other where you actually do need to leave quite a bit of time sometimes between questions. So if you start doing this or if you're not getting results that you're looking for, try slowing everything down.
Exactly. And also if you're, with a group of people, which I often am, and somebody asks a question and then immediately two more people ask questions, I mean, that completely defeats the purpose because you could be getting EVPs that are a little bit lower audibly and people are just talking over it. And so when you do hear it, you're not even able to pull out what's being said. So I say, one person ask a question, wait 20, 30 seconds before another question's asked. Even if it's by a different person, at least leave that 20, 30-second gap where you have silence.
Right.
And if you have something else going on that's going to leave a background noise, make sure you do what we call tagging it. Say that was Billy Bob opening the door, or that was somebody stepping on a creaky floorboard,
right?
Or
car honking outside, or
exactly. Because going back, it may not seem like it, but yeah, if you've got hours worth of recordings, spread out through different people recording, and you're listening to it, and you're like, oh, I hear something. It may totally slipped your mind. It was because somebody shifted their chair,
right?
And sometimes that shifting can sound like something completely different.
Right. I mean, especially if you're out doing hunting during the winter and it actually gets cold where you are because it doesn't really hear. But, the clothing that you're wearing definitely makes noise, whether you know it or not, especially like sports jackets, things like that. So, be cautious of your movements.
Right. That's very good. Be aware of everything that's going on around you, what you're doing, what the people in your team, if you've got other people with you, what they're doing, which I always recommend anyway. If you're going into a place to do an investigation, it's always best not to go alone.
Right.
Unless, it's in your own house or something like that.
Right.
It's just a safety issue.
Which, if you're nervous about going to a haunted, like a verified haunted location for, say, your first investigation, practice around your house. I mean, there's probably a good chance that you're not going to get anything, but at least you can feel a little bit more comfortable if you're doing an investigation at night,
Right. Or even if you are venturing off and you're doing it by yourself and you, like in a cemetery, take a recorder with you, take an audio recorder and do it in the daytime.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing that says you cannot investigate in the daytime. It's pretty common, actually. If people have the ability and the time to do it off their regular jobs, it's kind of ideal to do it like that.
And that's the thing, like a lot of people don't realize is when these shows come in to do these investigations, when the people are reporting the activity, they're reporting it during business hours. So, the occurrences are happening all throughout the day, and it's just that the investigators are going in and they're investigating from, close until 6 a.m. the next morning.
Right.
So just that alone goes to show that, hauntings or whatever you want to call it don't just happen at night.
Right. That's exactly right. You're able to do it anytime because if it's there, it's there. I don't really I haven't really seen that something is usually more active at night than it is in the day. It's just usually you notice it more at night if it's happening because everything's quieter, everything's darker.
Right.
It's already got that sort of feeling for a lot of people because it's a little bit unknown. Your senses are heightened at that point.
Yeah.
So it's definitely worthwhile to do things in the daytime as well as the nighttime. There's no real difference with it, honestly. The only difference it sometimes makes, going back to equipment, is if you're using something that relies on the dark, like infrared or something like that, because it needs it to be darker in order for those sensors to pick up.
Yeah.
Reliably, anyway. So, EVPs, yeah, I mean, and that's another thing with that, too. You'll notice on a lot of the shows, they'll do what they call live EVP sessions, where they'll record like 2 minutes or less, asking just a few simple questions, and then they'll go back and immediately review what they've just listened to, and just to see if they're getting any evidence right then. But the thing with EVPs, too, you can't do an investigation and record 2 minutes, and that's it.
Right.
I mean, it's, in my opinion, from my experience, live EVPs are really good to kind of get sort of a feel on how well the EVPs are being picked up at that moment, but things can change from hour to hour within a haunted location. And it's best that if you have the ability to, or if you have several recorders, to let one run the entire time you're at a place and then go back and review it. And then one that you interact with, that you keep with you as you go from, say, room to room and ask questions, and then go back and review that at the end of the investigation. So you may, say right there, you're in a place for 3 hours and you've got 2 recorders. You now have 6 hours worth of audio to go over.
Right.
So, and,
But when we were in Moon River, I noticed that you had done that. Actually, we caught it on 3 separate recorders because you had one going at that exact moment, but then you had another one that you were carrying around that was recording constantly, and I was recording on my phone. And all 3 of those recorders at the same time, but it was at different pitches. It was like they were at different distances from the actual voice.
Yeah, it kind of, I don't want to say it triangulated like where it was at, but yeah, in a way, because we were standing in different places using different recorders. So we got the same recording on 3 different recorders, but they sounded a little bit different because of where they were in relation to where we were.
Right.
Where the origin of that voice was or something.
Which is super cool to me. I don't know why. Yeah. I just think that's neat.
And another thing, to not get too detailed about it, but to also with recorders, look at the input frequencies or the dynamic range of the recorder. You want something that will go as low as you can get it as far as the lower frequencies and as high as you can get it on the high end. Some things like this microphone that we're using is very specific to picking up a vocal dynamic range, whereas a lot of microphones in, say, pocket-sized digital recorders, they have a wider dynamic range, so they're actually picking up frequencies that are below human hearing and above human hearing. The microphones are designed to do that, and that actually helps with EVPs because they're covering a wider frequency range. It's almost like a full-spectrum camera. It's going to see what you see in a spectrum of light, but it's also going to see in the ultraviolet and infrared, which we can't see with our naked eye. So that's sort of a comparison with that. And every microphone or every recorder will have, if you look at their specifications, it'll say, what the range is on the low end and the hertz and the high end and stuff. So, but just getting a little technical with that. You can really record with anything if it's capable of recording. I know I say that all the time with EVP.
Yeah.
It's capable of recording sound. It's capable of recording EVP.
So, where was your first investigation?
My first investigation. Like an organized investigation? Or just in general?
Let's say in general, like your first in general and then your first organized.
Without really realizing, I guess, what it was, probably my first real one like that was when I was a kid, and I was talking about in one of the previous podcasts with the first EVPs I ever heard. Because once I realized I was recording something that I wasn't hearing with my own ears on a reel-to-reel, I started doing it frequently and started walking around the house and asking questions and being like, who are you? Why are you? Who is this? What's going on? Because at the time, at the first time I heard it, I just thought it was garbled noise, but then when I played it at a different speed, I realized they were words. So it both scared me and intrigued me. So I would say that was probably my first time, and I think I was in the 3rd or 4th grade at that
Oh, wow.
time. So, and it was just me out in the middle of nowhere in a house that had a lot of creepy stuff going on in it. So, and I honestly don't know what I can say about my first investigation, because it all kind of blends in. I think probably one of the first times I can say we really did that, it was me with other people, was going out to a place near a lake, down on the edge of Orange Park, where Doctor's Lake Drive is. There was this lake that sits at the back of a housing development, and we would go by it to get to a path leading through the woods that goes to the St. Johns River. And one night we went out there. It was just me and a bunch of my friends. We went out there, and we saw these weird little flickering lights over the lake. And at first we thought they were lightning bugs. But then as we got closer to them, they all kind of sort of converged and zipped off super fast into the trees away from the lake. And we were like, what the hell did we just see? And so one of my friends, their first thing was, oh, that's Fairy Lake, and people see this all the time. And I'm like, you got to be bullshitting me, because I didn't really think anything like that. I'm like, all right, well, there's got to be something more to it. So we actually went out and we started, like, when we could get out there in the evenings, go out there and try to see those lights again. And it was just, I would say that was my first investigation. It's not really even ghosts, but it's sort of a cryptid creature, I guess.
See, in my head, I'm just like, they're fucking fireflies. And y'all probably had a little bit of acid.
No, not at that point. Not at that point. No, it was weird because literally we thought they were fireflies, but then it's like they would just stop, and probably like maybe a dozen of them, and they literally would converge, just zoom, zip away really quick into the trees, and that was it. And we saw it happen like 3 or 4 different times, different occasions over the, probably a span of a year. So. And then we used to do other sorts of things that I wouldn't really kind of call an investigation by today's standards. Things like going out to old cemeteries with Ouija boards and tape recorders.
Yeah.
And it just sort of went from there, because we did that a lot. We would go to these old cemeteries in the middle of the night, that were kind of in the trees, or places that already had sort of legends associated with them. And at first we would just try to get recordings of stuff, and then we decided, hey, well, let's take Ouija boards out there and see if we can get other sort of evidence that way. So EVPs, sort of a first thing. K2 meters, EMF.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about that? Would you consider yourself more attuned to using something for EVPs, or what is your thoughts on EMFs? What about, like, as far as investigations with you, what would you consider your first ones and what you used or relied on the most?
Well, I guess, like, I'm the most familiar with, like, EVPs, but I feel like we've talked about that until, like, we're blue in the face. So
yeah, well, it can always be talked about though. But you're sensitive.
Yeah.
So
I don't know. I feel like when I hear EVPs, I can I feel like sometimes I hear them a lot better because of that. Or I'm able to tell that's not what it's saying when we're reviewing things.
Right.
Because it's not that I hear it correctly, it's that I feel that it's wrong.
Right. You make a personal connection with the recording because of the empathic.
Right, but you can also do that, like our interaction today with your friend. She was telling you about a situation that happened and how she thought that it was that. And as you're reading it to me, I told you no.
Right.
That's not right. So, I rely a lot on what my gut tells me. Sometimes I'm not good about that in my real life. But when it comes to things like that, I pay very, very close attention. So that's my big thing when I go into an investigation. I guess I started picking up on that with me when I was in about 5th grade, but I didn't use it for an investigation or anything.
Right.
I've never, I have now as an adult, but that's the only other reliable thing that I can say. But that's me personally. That's not something that everyone goes into an investigation with.
Right.
So.
Right.
But as far as I guess my first non-group investigation was me with a Ouija board in 6th grade in my bedroom.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you already knew something was there, so that was the point of using the Ouija board.
Right, but I definitely made it worse.
Yeah.
But my first group one was actually with Ryan Dunn and Afterlife Tours when we did Moon River up in Savannah, Georgia.
Right.
And because it was my first one, I was scared to death.
You didn't seem scared sometimes.
Well, no, the drive up in the car, I thought I was going to pee my pants.
You had that anticipation sort of.
Yeah, I did. I thought that I was going to pee my pants.
But the first time that REM pod went off upstairs in the abandoned part, and you went running, guys, that's still the best part.
I went running up dilapidated stairs too, with no railing.
Yeah. That were leaning sideways off the wall in an area that had been abandoned for over a decade already.
Yeah.
So.
But yeah, I don't know. That was my first real investigation. And if you guys ever get the chance, he does the overnights at Moon River, I think once or twice a year. I know he's got one coming up in October.
Yeah, mid-October he's going to be doing one. It's with the Savannah Ghost Research Society or afterlifetours.net. It's Ryan Dunn, so you can find them both online that way, Facebook and stuff.
But having that been my first investigation ever, I feel like it's a really good one because it is active.
Yes.
And it's a good active. I had a lot of fun doing it because of the fact that it was so active. I don't know. I was just super jazzed about all of it.
Yeah.
I was totally disco.
Yeah. It's all disco. Michael Keaton would be proud.
Oh, thanks. Thanks. I've been watching a lot of Luther lately, so y'all have to excuse me.
Yeah. Moon River has been investigated by quite a few groups, and, it's been on quite a few different of the most popular sort of ghost hunting shows, and even the BuzzFeed guys, Shane and Ryan did it, Zach Bagans did it, stuff like that. But it is always an active place. And plus, when you're doing it with Ryan, when he does his overnight, you actually get access to the top floors of Moon River Brewing Company that are completely closed off to the public. Very old, decrepit, abandoned areas of the building. And those areas in the basement seem like really the most active parts too.
Yeah, I really like the basement.
Yeah. It has a vibe all of its own. That old stone underground basement in Savannah. And that's also one of the areas where I got my apparition just standing there with, with the light anomalies afterwards. And then what was it with Zach with the shadow creature attacking him or whatever it was when the pool table was there and stuff on Ghost Adventures.
The mama thing with me.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we played that on our EVP. Did we play that?
No, I don't think that we had that one on there.
Oh, well, maybe not. Well,
I think
anyway.
maybe we should find that one and
yeah.
put it on this one before.
Yeah, maybe I'll see what I can do. It was an interesting one about just an EVP saying mama talking to Amanda here. So that's what it was really seeming to be directed as. So I guess the next thing to really talk about as far as investigations, if you're wanting to get some more sort of equipment without breaking the bank, are EMF detectors.
Yeah.
To me, I mean, I use them when we do our tours, and we do use EMF detectors in basically every investigation. But there's something that a lot of people need to understand, which I think I spend more time explaining EMF detectors on my tours than anything else. That an EMF detector is simply that. It detects EMF, which is electromagnetic frequencies, meaning that they are designed to do things like detect arcing wires in walls, magnetic fields around compressors like what you have in your refrigerator, stuff like that.
Right. Cell phones.
Yes. Anything that is going to give off an electronic or magnetic field, basically.
Yeah.
So they're not quote unquote ghost detectors right out of the box. When people use them, when we use them in investigations, we kind of go in and we find out where areas are already kind of high in EMF or what that baseline reading is throughout a building, so that we know the areas that are affecting people the most with EMF, with electronic fields or magnetic fields.
Right.
And then after we figure out those areas and rule out if those actual magnetic fields from electronic devices are causing people to experience something that they think is paranormal, it could just be that they're sensitive to EMF fields. So we'll take them to an area that really should not have any EMF at all, a room where we're not getting any readings, their baseline readings should be 0. Then if they start peaking or spiking and we get EMF anomalously, we know that it's something else. And we can set it down or, be in an area with it, and we can ask spirit to interact with it, to set it off, because there shouldn't be anything setting it off in an area with no EMF naturally there. So.
See, I feel like it's super handy for, like, the scientific reasons of, like, okay, we've got live wires here or, things like that. But I think for me, just, I refuse to walk around with something in my hand. You know that.
Yeah.
So I feel because I'm more sensitive that I don't need it, because I feel it.
Right.
When there's something close,
feel it already.
I feel it.
Yeah.
I don't need that reader. I don't know. I like it for the beginning of the investigation to eliminate issues. Like, obviously, if a teddy bear is putting off EMF, it should not be. There's nothing electronic in a stuffed animal. That I do. I like it for that reason. But as far as, like, it letting you know whether there's something in the room, I personally don't feel as though it's necessary.
Yeah. But if you're doing, like, say, a group investigation and you want something verifiable to someone, you can't say, oh, well, I felt something here. And they're going to say, well, how do
right. No, I see where they're handy.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And, or if an item, say that there's a weird, like, the other day I went into that apartment in St. Augustine and I was taking a group there, and there was one of those little super bouncy balls that as soon as we walked into the back bedroom, it kind of launched itself at one of the people as they walked in the door. And later on, we picked up, or I didn't, one of the people in my group picked up the ball, and everybody put their EMF meter around it, and the ball was spiking the EMF meters.
Right.
But,
right.
And then 30 seconds later, it was back to normal again.
See, and that's where I think that it is really neat and really handy. But I don't know, there's so much equipment out there that you have full knowledge of. I'm just going to let you roll with a few of them.
Well, the whole
and
point
I'll,
is
interject.
The whole point is to not, I mean, this is kind of like an intro, so not to focus on getting every piece of equipment you can. So I'll just introduce a few of them, I guess, and maybe some of the things you see, like on the shows or whatever. Any camera your cell phone camera, a point and shoot camera, Kodak camera if you have an old Kodak camera, whatever.
How do you feel about Polaroids? Like,
Polaroid?
I mean, I think it would be cool. I've never seen an apparition or anything taken with a Polaroid.
Right.
I would love to, because I just think that it would be really neat. I don't know why.
There are pictures, apparitions that have been taken with them, and at one point in time, people really relied on Polaroid or like those instant cameras because of the fact they considered them fraud proof, so to speak.
Right, that's why. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you're getting what you see right then and there. You can't Photoshop it while it's developing in your hand.
Right.
There's no negative associated with it. It's an actual physical process that's developing right in front of you.
Well, I guess the only thing that you could do is like run your finger across it as it's developing, and it would cause.
It really shouldn't even do that.
A blemish. I feel like it would, though.
No,
Does
because
it not?
it's when you look at a Polaroid picture, how it's got that big white section down at the bottom. So what's happening is the Polaroid itself is kind of a negative. And when you take the picture, it exposes that print section. And then as it comes through the roller, if you look on that little white strip, there's little pockets that are in it. And that roller is actually pressing chemicals into it, and that's what causes the developing.
Okay.
So it's literally an on-demand developer built into it.
All
and if
right.
you've ever ripped one apart, it's all gooey inside.
No.
That's because of those chemicals. Okay. Well, I have quite a few times as a kid. Because I used to take everything apart. But yeah, I mean, that's one of those things that have, for a long time, were basically just considered fraud-proof. There was a guy, and this is very obscure, so this is like way back in the day, who claimed to have the ability to take psychic photos using a Polaroid by holding. I
remember hearing about this.
Yeah, he like held the camera to his head, or he like covered up the lens completely, and then he could actually take a photo, and spirits would be on there. And I think that was pretty much debunked anyway, because there were ways that he could manipulate the actual light that was coming in by like pre-made lens caps that you couldn't really tell had little holes and stuff in them, sort of like the Uri Geller with bending stuff.
Yes.
If somebody handed Uri Geller their own piece of something and tried to make him do it, like what happened on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, he completely did not do anything. He's like, I feel like I'm being set up here, because he was.
Right.
Because it's like, if they could do it in a controlled situation, they should be able to prove it. And then at that point, that's when it was like, okay, I'm not really an alien. I don't really have these powers. I'm just an entertainer. So, and that, I think, because this happened like back in like, I want to say the 60s and 70s with the Polaroid spirit photo guy, that it was kind of debunked, showing there could be ways around it. There was even a stage magician a few years ago who came out with an app to take pictures of ghosts in your phone.
Yes.
And it was really a gimmick that you basically had a transparency that you held in your finger, and then as you were taking a picture, you slowly put it over the lens of the camera so that when it took a photo, it looked like there was a spirit there. And you could use anybody's phone that had a camera on it. So it was just a gimmick. So we're getting way off topic.
Yeah, way off topic.
So getting into sort of an intro to doing these investigations, use what you have. Use your intuition. If you don't feel safe in an area, don't go into that area.
Right.
Try to go with buddies. Do your research first. I think within investigating, that's the most important part of it. Somebody could say, oh, well, such and such bridge down the road's haunted because somebody's body was put into the concrete when they were making the bridge, so therefore it's haunted. That may be an urban legend that more than likely is an urban legend, because I've heard that about lots of different bridges throughout the country. But there may be something more to what started people with that urban legend for that particular place. So do your research on the history of it. Why did that story even start?
Right.
Did somebody jump off the bridge, Did somebody die making it, That sort of thing.
Pay attention to smells, too.
Yes.
Because you'll be amazed, like, when you're in a place that hasn't been, I don't know, say used for anything in a really long time, other than, like But let's say an antique store is a perfect example. You know, nothing's been cooked in there for a very long time. No one's been smoking in a place for a very long time, stuff like that. So when you smell those smells, note it.
Right. That's really good, especially if you're not the only one smelling that.
Right.
There's a lot of olfactory senses involved with haunted locations. The smell of flowers, or the smell of cigar smoke or pipe or tobacco smoke of any kind.
Certain colognes.
Yeah, colognes. And then you have the more grotesque smells, which oftentimes are associated with more negative or malevolent things, like a garlicky smell or a sulfury smell. When you start experiencing that, that is also a sign to pay attention to, that there's something around.
Right.
So even though it may, it's not something you can measure with a piece of equipment, that is, a personal experience. If more than one person is in your group doing that and they all are experiencing that, that's a big sign. So.
Right.
And, we've both experienced that in places.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it's pretty common, honestly, with a lot of people in a lot of different areas. I've been in places where, nothing's really going on. Then one day you go in there and it reeks of like garlic and sulfur. And the next thing you know, all this negative stuff starts happening.
Right.
Or even like, say, the lighthouse at St. Augustine. It's rare, but there is also the experience of people smelling cigar smoke there. And if you go back and you research the history, there was actually a lighthouse keeper that was associated with the cigar smoke that people smell. There's a whole story behind him and the reason why that happens. And that's sort of an apparition of its own. I mean, it's not visual, but it's olfactory. It's something that is giving you a clue there's something there. So.
And that's the thing. You don't have to be sensitive for those things. It's just, you just have to have a nose that works, honestly, because they will pretty much put it in your face.
Exactly.
If they want you to pay attention and you're not sensitive in that way and you're not paying attention to them and their ways of trying to get your attention, they'll throw it in your face with a scent of some kind.
Right. And it may be the only way that they can do it at that point too, because it takes a lot of energy for spirit to manifest itself, say in a noise or in a picture or even in a sound recording, that maybe that's all they got to work with at the moment.
Right.
You say, give us a sign, let us smell something, let us hear something like that. And then if that happens, ask them to do it again if they're capable, because say a noise, you hear a knock one time, it could be something else. So you want to try to debunk that. Say, this time do it again, give me 2 knocks, and if it happens an hour later after you ask, then it's not reliable evidence. But if it happens, within a minute or something of you saying that, then it's something to be a little bit more relied upon as actual evidence.
And that's another thing. When you're going into investigation, especially if it's your first one, a lot of people don't think to try to debunk a lot of what's going on, and you really should.
Yes.
If you're in an area with, windows, even though they're shut, especially if it's an old home and you feel a breeze, check the seals on the windows. Check to see if there's an air vent. Check to see if the air's on. There's a lot of stuff that goes on that can be explained. There's no reason to jump immediately to, the place is haunted.
Exactly, yeah.
Definitely try to figure out, well, where did that noise come from? What could have made that sound before you're like, okay, well.
And it could be as simple as keeping some Kleenex or toilet paper in your bag of stuff when you go. If you aren't feeling a draft somewhere, take a piece of toilet paper, take a piece of Kleenex, and just lightly hold it by the corner, by the edge, around windows and stuff to see, because you may not feel it, but it may register. That's why if you've ever seen vents in like offices that have like little pieces of tissue paper taped to them, that's so they know if those vents are working. It's the same kind of concept. So DIY ghost hunting materials.
Right. See, another cheap thing just to have on hand
Yeah.
anyway.
It's always,
And it's always good to have extra toilet paper in case you shit your pants.
it is. I mean,
You
yeah,
know.
definitely. some of the places out there, you may feel that may be what happens
So, speaking of places and things and stuff,
and stuff.
if I were coming to you and I was like, okay, I want to do my first investigation, how would you guide them? Like, where would you tell them to go? Like, what would be the best place? Or what's the best way of getting together with a group where you can go?
I think probably first off, I would ask them what they hope to accomplish with it to begin with. Like, are they looking for evidence? Or are they just curious because they've seen it on TV? Or what are their motives behind it?
Right.
After that, I would kind of figure out, well, how much do you really know about it? That sort of thing. How deep do you want to get into it? And then I would suggest, if you're looking for a group, it's a weird catch-22 with paranormal investigative groups nowadays. It seems that there are so many of them that are around, but so few of them are willing to bring in new people on a regular basis, or even entertain the idea of bringing in someone new.
Right.
So I would say, go on Facebook, see what's around in your area first. Message some of them, ask them, some of their techniques, how long they've been around, what are their qualifications. If it's just a group of people that got together last week and said they're ghost hunters,
right,
and they really have no clue, then it's probably better to stay away from them to begin with, because either one, they're just getting started on their own, or two, they're not really reliable, I guess you can say.
Right.
I don't want to sound like a jerk about it, but I mean, it's true. You got to know who you're with for your own safety.
And if you don't have one in your city or town or whatever, check the nearest closest big city to you.
Yes.
And that way you'll probably have a better chance of finding higher caliber type groups to go with. And it's fun to get out of your own town and investigate too.
Yeah. I mean, once you start asking around, you'll be surprised at how many people out there are connected to other people that are out there, and it's sort of a domino effect. And, in the end, if it comes down to it, start your own,
Yeah.
Learn as much as you can about it. Not just watching the shows, but, watching some of the stuff behind the shows and going online and looking at some of the forums of people who've been doing it for a while, and listen to other people's podcasts, interviewing people that have been in the field for a long time. That's, I think, a big part of it, because they all got into it for a reason too. And those interviews are going to let you know their motivations, their qualifications, what they've gone through.
Right.
So don't try to reinvent the wheel, I guess you can say. But I mean, there's nothing wrong with starting your own group. Just make sure you do it right, and it's not for the wrong reasons, I guess.
Right.
So that you know what you're doing, both for safety and, especially if you're wanting to involve other people in it and go to residences and stuff. I mean, there are plenty of places out there to go and investigate on your own to begin with, such as cemeteries. I always recommend cemeteries.
Right.
Just because, I mean, that's what a cemetery is. It's just a whole area where, even though a cemetery is for dead people, like their bodies, there are still always spirits that are kind of hanging out in that area for whatever reason. And sometimes I really think that a lot of cemeteries are put where they are because they already have an energy in that ground, and that's what makes people choose that ground to be special and sacred as a cemetery. And they may not even know they're doing it, but a lot of places, like, more historic cemeteries, they were put there, like the Talamato, for a good example, in St. Augustine. The Talamato Cemetery, that's been there since 1777, was a Timucuan Indian burial, or not Timucua, it was a Talamato, the Guale Indian burial ground before it even became a Catholic cemetery. So it was already considered a sacred spot.
Right.
And we don't always realize why things are historically put where they are, but if you go back and you look at the history of the land, sometimes it's because it had always been considered sacred before anybody even came there.
Right.
So I think that sort of has an impact on the decision itself too.
And I think if you live in any type of city or town where there was historically, like, animosity of any kind, I feel like you can even go into the woods, like out in the middle of nowhere, and do an investigation and get stuff. Because you don't have to have buildings to have spirits, you know?
That's a really good example here in the South. We have areas that are in the woods that were actually used as skirmishes. And so there's actually areas where there's still trenches that are just grown over from actual skirmishes from, you know, the Civil War, from the Indian Wars, stuff like that, you know. And sometimes even out in the middle of nowhere because of homesteaders and, you know, people were fighting them for land they were settling, you know, in the early days and stuff. Ghost towns and stuff that may not even completely be there anymore. And it's just, to you, it looks like a wooded area, but especially here in the South, and even places up in the Midwest, I've come through quite a places. My family used to mushroom hunt on this one person's land, and there was a cemetery out in the middle of the forest.
Right.
So, and, you know, who knows why it was there or whatever, but it was like in the middle of the woods, totally forgotten. So there's always history behind what you're seeing.
Right.
So that's another research thing too, I think. So.
But yeah.
So that covers, I mean, you know, I know it's sort of kind of a catch-all little intro, but it's not as difficult as you may think to get into the field. It's just find out your reasons why and look at what interests you the most, because not every paranormal investigative group is going to have all of the most high-tech equipment. No, they're not going to have the budget for it. And also, even within each group, there's going to be people that are going to specialize in certain things.
Yeah.
A lot of groups will have somebody who's a sensitive, maybe not, but they'll have somebody who's a sensitive or maybe even a medium. They'll have somebody that only does EVP or somebody that only does photography because that's their specialty or that's what they're passionate about. So.
Right. And I think some people are in groups and they don't even know that they're sensitive. You know, they're just like, oh, my head hurts all of a sudden, and I don't know why.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So that's another thing. Like, somebody may not go into it knowing that they're as sensitive, but sometimes people walk out after a little while realizing that they actually are.
I agree. And I've seen that firsthand even with my tours.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
People who are completely skeptical, and then we go into an area and they're like, I don't feel so good, or my head hurts. I'm like, well, that's because you're experiencing something. You know?
Right.
So, and they don't even realize it.
I think the big thing is, especially if you're kind of nervous or uncomfortable, like you're really curious about it, but you're super scared to do it for whatever reason, just go into it and have fun. Like, nothing... Especially if you're with a group of friends where you can have a little bit of fun, you know, take it seriously, do your recording, but enjoy it.
Right.
You know, if you go in scared to death, you're going to shit your pants. It's just the first thing that gets kicked over accidentally, you're going to have a massive heart attack.
Dude, run, jumping out the window.
Right.
Yeah.
So just go into it and have fun. Get excited about possibly finding something. I think that's the big thing.
I agree. And I think, too, the idea, if you're with a group of people and you already have, I don't want to say be reckless and be disrespectful, but if you already have sort of a calm, lighthearted attitude with the group that you're with, be like that. Just go into it and act normal. I mean, be quieter, obviously, you know, because you don't want to be talking the entire time and laughing and telling jokes. But, you know, go into it being respectful and have fun with it.
I think when you go in positive, they feel that too, and they'll be more receptive to you, and you'll be more receptive to them.
Exactly.
When you're going in nervous, negative things tend to become attracted to that. So you're automatically putting off an uneasy, uncomfortable, because nervousness, I feel, is has more energy to it than just positive energy.
Right.
Because it's frantic.
And you're making chaos around you.
Right.
Like if you go into a place and you're by yourself, and as soon as you walk into, say, a bar or something like that, and you're like, oh my god, there's all these like ex-con looking tattooed bikers hanging out there, and they all mean mug you as soon as you walk in, you're not going to want to hang out.
Right.
So put yourself in the shoes of a spirit. If they're in a place and they walk in and they see all these investigators that are either, already really scared or really disorganized, they're be like, I'm not going to have anything to do with those guys. Because it's what I always say, like, spirit has the same personality as they had when they were alive,
right.
basically. And, they want to feel like they can feel safe communicating with you just as much as you want to feel safe trying to communicate with them.
Right.
So I think that's kind of a good analogy.
I guess the big thing that we didn't cover is before you go into something, just say something positive. Say, that you're being you want to be receptive to whatever is in there, but nothing negative can harm you. Say a prayer if you're religious.
Right.
Whatever you want to do, but just, I personally don't. I have different things that I do before I go into places. But, a lot of people that I know that we do investigate actually do, form a circle and say a prayer.
Yeah.
It's just to protect yourself. You don't want to bring anything home with you. You don't want anything to attach to you. So just,
Yeah, whatever you feel like is a proper method for yourself of kind of a spiritual protection, I guess you can say. Do
right.
that. And also, make it known that when you're going in, you don't mean any disrespect or harm to whatever you're trying to communicate with or find within an investigation. Let them know you're there for, a positive purpose, that you're interested.
Right.
And you want to know what they're going through, and you want to be able to communicate with them on that level, make them feel welcome also.
Right. Just like, you don't just go barging into somebody's home, even if, they've invited you over.
Yeah.
You
you
still knock.
Yeah.
Well, most people do.
Yeah.
I do have friends where you can literally just walk into their homes, but
friends and family, it's a whole different thing.
Right.
But
right.
And it's also, too, another good point is that once you leave an area, you kind of do the same thing. Even if it's just a matter of shaking your hands and sort of brushing off your arms, that's sort of breaking that bond, so to speak, so you're not holding on to whatever energies may have been lingering around that could form an attachment.
Right.
I know with me, the very first thing that I do when I come home, and it may sound silly, but because of the fact that I've worked, within like hands-on healing and stuff in the past with Reiki and things like that, touch is a very important thing to me, and it's a transference of energy. Everything and everybody you touch, you're sort of giving and taking some sort of energy that way. So the very first thing I do when I come home is I go to the bathroom and I wash my hands. And it's not for only germ purposes, but to me, it's symbolic of like I'm washing away anything that could be sort of lingering on to me. Some people sage themselves. Some people just say a prayer. Some people have Florida water and they sprinkle it on them, or holy water or whatever. So
I just don't like people touching me.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, with certain people, there's an odd connection there where, certain people hug, certain people shake hands and stuff, but I'm not like that with the common everyday person that I don't know. I'm not going to, be in a physical sort of like, I got my space, they got their space.
Right. Well, my parents were never the types of people that were like, go hug your blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Like, they let me, if I was comfortable with them, I could. If I didn't want to, I didn't have to. So,
yeah,
I've just been big on personal space. Not a touchy-feely person.
Yeah, that's a good point. So, I think that kind of covers a lot of just sort of intro stuff. Do you have anything else you want to add?
No, I think that's pretty much it. If you guys have any questions or comments or anything, feel free to get a hold of us on Facebook, the Westgate Paranormal.
Yep. Westgate Paranormal on Facebook, or you can even email us, westgateparanormal@gmail.com. Pretty much anything Westgate Paranormal, all one word. If you Google it, it's going to more than likely bring you to us. We have an Instagram that we just started too, so that's also at Westgate Paranormal. So, yeah, I think that kind of sums it up, though.
Yeah.
And I know this was a little bit more sort of just sort of an open dialogue sort of thing, and maybe we're taking a step back because we've covered more technical things in previous podcasts, but a lot of people are kind of, they ask us, well, how do you get into this? Or what do I need to do? What kind of equipment we need? And that sort of thing. So start simple. Do what you know. Research where you go. Be safe when you're doing it. Don't go into abandoned buildings alone in the middle of the night.
Please, dear God, don't.
Yeah, because it could be dangerous on lots of different levels, and in a lot of places it's a felony. So, you never know what you're coming across.
In all honesty, it just gets a little rapey and a little stabby.
Yeah, you never know what's in there. Animals, vagrants, psychotic homicidal maniacs strung out on bath salts. Who knows? Zombies.
Michael Keaton.
Yeah, Michael Keaton. So... But anyway, thank you all again, and we'll go ahead and end it here. And we look forward to our next podcast. I've got some good things in the works here, some announcements coming up, some interviews that I'm planning. So be sure to stay tuned and spread the word. Let people know about our Facebook page, our podcasts, and everything, and share it. And until next time, thank you very much.
See y'all later.
Bye-bye.